All right. We are live. UJ, welcome to the future of fitness, my friend.
Thank you, Eric. Thank you so much for having me.
I appreciate you making the time. And you and I, for context, we met at IDEA conference in July of earlier this year, so 2023. And I kept going back to your booth to get some more Tecton drink when I got tired in the afternoon. And both my colleague and I, Mitch, were like, stuff's really good, man. Like, I feel really good. Like, yeah. I'm like, I was zapped, at a conferences, you talk so much and you're always interacting. It's just very tiring, at least for someone like me. So it was interesting. So finally I went over there and met you, the founder and CEO of the company. We chatted for a while. You sounded like a very interesting person to me in the product. And it's not something I've covered recently, which is, the world of ketones. And we'll talk about exogenous ketones and what you guys are doing. So really, really excited to have you on the show, and your experience, your depth of knowledge in particular areas is really valuable. And some of the stuff, besides Tecton and Blue Earth, what you do with that company, your experience at Coca-Cola, your experience at Procter & Gamble, your interest in, changing human behavior at scale, which I think you and I both agree. I've talked about that a couple times on this show before. It's like, that's kind of the core of what we do in the fitness and wellness industries, right? Is we need to change human behavior, because what's happening right now, at least in the Western countries, it's not good. So I'm going to stop talking for a little bit. Let's get into your background to start, UJ, and then we'll go from there.
All right, Eric, thank you so much for having me. One correction, I'm a co-founder, and I'll talk a
Okay,
little bit about my co-founder as we go into this. I'm the co-founder and CEO of Tecton.
great.
My background, I started out, my dad was a fighter pilot in the Indian Air Force, and, we moved every 6 months to 2 years. I went to 13 different schools in 6 different states growing up in India. Wanted to be a cricket player, so I ended up going to college, playing cricket in college as well. And but I had to make some money, so I did door-to-door sales and started a small company helping some of the biggest global brands that had just started to enter India or re-enter India after the liberalization of the economy. And uh, P&G was one of my clients, and I was helping them to take a new detergent and talk to distributors, and one of the first processed foods, and talk to housewives and get them to buy something they've been accustomed to making by hand. So I got kicked out of a lot of homes because the food was not made that day. That was they were shocked to hear that some of it was over a year old. But it was a great learning, and I did an MBA, went to work for P&G then at some point after working for an ad agency for a period of time. And I ended up working for Coca-Cola in India. And because of my undergrad experience doing door-to-door sales, launching new brands, somehow I got picked into that vertical of new product launches. So with P&G, we worked on the Pantene launch in India and Asia. At Coke, launched their first water brand in India, in the world, but it started in India. And then moved to Atlanta, ran a JV between Coke and Nestle, selling Nestle around the world. So kind of my experiences with creating new products and taking new brands to market, from the door-to-door, front end all the way to strategic global plans for the JV in Atlanta. I kind of started to learn that, somehow if you want to build a brand that really stands out, that consumers are going to be loyal to, and they're not going to switch brands just because they have a price discount on the shelf, then there's something obviously wrong that I'm doing, because
Mm.
my brands are not they were not able to transcend their competitors. If retailers drop price, retailers have consolidated, co-packers had allowed really low barriers to entry. Anyone could launch a beverage. So the market was getting highly commoditized. So I started to find a pattern by studying how some brands like Red Bull had come from nowhere with, none of the might and reach and funding of a Coca-Cola or Pepsi, and still dominated a whole new category. So I was fascinated by how that happened. I looked at Gatorade, another brand in the sports and fitness industry that came out of, unconventional, origins rather than a large company. There's nothing, no rocket science in that product, but it still built an incredible brand. And how did they do that? So then I started looking outside the industry, and I looked at Nike and Apple and all of these brands. They pass what I like to call the tattoo test, which is, do your consumers, or at least a good percentage of them, love you enough that they'll not buy anything else? And then some percentage of those consumers, would they put a tattoo of your brand on their skin? You see people in Mercedes Benz's, expensive cars with a little 2-cent Apple sticker at the back. And you think to yourself, well, why would you put a 2-cent sticker on a $200,000 car? But that's the power of a brand.
Yeah, it's a really interesting topic, and I urge people to. You have a great TEDx talk that I watched this morning, the 7 disciplines for building a transcendent brand, and it was you point out a lot of this stuff, and it just made me think a lot. Like I think about Harley Davidson, like literally you see tattoos of people with Harleys, right? All the time. It's not all the time, but more than you think that somebody would want to do that, the whole concept of creating a brand, as I was talking to you pre-recording, it's like, it's a hard thing to put a metric on, right? It's a feeling, as you put it, it's a trust. And I had, Andrew Sugarman, who's, now the CEO of Center, Chris Hemsworth's company, was on recently. And we talked about, Star Wars as a brand, and, the fanboys in Star Wars, and the trust between Star Wars and the fans. And like, it's just this complicated thing. Like, how do you put a metric on that? You can't. It's just purely, a sense, a feeling. It's a concept, and it's really interesting. And maybe with all this experience that you have, Jay, of working with all these brands and the study that you put in, I mean, you're not academic. You're very practical in application of what you do. Let's talk about Tecton, because I think that'd be a great example of how you look at brands and the efforts you're putting in to separate from the field there. I mean, so what was the impetus for starting Tecton? And then we'll take it from there.
Yeah, great. And I think the segue between branding and Tecton is, I always say that the first thing that I look for in an entrepreneur or a brand is, why do they do what they do? And it's not just a why in terms of, hey, do you do this to make money, or you're doing this to make a difference in the world? It's got to be a lot more specific than that. Do you truly have a deeply seated motive and intention and true passion to see a certain change in the world? And you take a guy like, Bill Barman, one of the coaches, coaches of Phil Knight, and the 2 co-founders of Nike. Bill Barman just wanted everyone to exercise. He wanted everyone to run. He truly believed everyone's an athlete. They just don't know it yet. And that was his passion, get people to run. And Nike, from that motivation, improved the quality of shoes. They marketed it to, runners across colleges, and slowly built what Nike is, a truly transcendent brand. So for us, after I left, I worked for Coca-Cola, as I was mentioning earlier. I left in 2008, started an agency to help train people on how to do innovation and branding, but in the purpose or impact sector, if you will. So landed up training a lot of scientists that the Gates Foundation was working with. And through the network, I landed up being introduced to a guy called Mike Chesney, who's my co-founder. He's a double Purple Heart Special Forces combat medic from the Delta Force. Incredible guy. Got blown up in Iraq a few times. And these nonprofits I was working with knew I was, my dad was a fighter pilot, as I mentioned. He died when he was 59 of PTSD related stuff. And so I have a very strong desire to support veterans because of that background. So this is going to be a nonprofit project I was going to take on when I met Mike. And then I realized that what Mike was trying to do was truly purposeful. My one question to him was, because they wanted me to join because of my beverage background. I said, why are you doing this? And he said, listen, I got blown up. I've got all these friends, veterans have come back from Iraq and Afghanistan, and, they're committing suicide at incredibly high rates, much higher than the standard population. And I think for brain health, we need to do something different. So I said, all right, sign me up. We'll work together. And that's kind of how we started, is to really create a solution for people with brain health issues driven by, either traumatic brain injuries or subconcussive hits that can also lead to CTE ultimately. So that was kind of the founding motive, to just figure out how we can provide an alternative source of energy for the brain, because glucose energy completely gets messed up anytime you have subconcussive hits or any kind of brain health issue. And ketones are far superior to glucose when it comes to brain health and brain energy. The problem is, to get ketones, the only way to do it naturally, purely naturally, is for your own body to make ketones. And that only happens if you completely give up carbs. So less than 30 net carbs a day is what I need to be. Otherwise, I get kicked out of ketosis. And 2 pieces of toast or an apple and a piece of bread can throw you out of ketosis. So
Right.
how are you going to take someone who just got a hit to now give up carbs for the next 3-4 days? I mean, you might be able to do it, but it's not very practical. And so that's why exogenous ketones come in. And that was kind of, so long story short, we thought we could do something with exogenous ketones to help military vets and any first responders with TBIs. And then the business morphed completely from there into something much, much, much bigger now.
Yeah. So maybe explain to me a little bit in those early days when you're working with, veterans, PTSD, and looking specifically at brain health. Like, what were the benefits specifically? What were the use cases and the benefits that that your early users,
Intentions were, yeah.
Yeah. What was that?
Yeah, so what happens in the brain when you have a TBI is your glucose metabolism gets messed up. And typically those cells that have been injured will not then get adequate nutrition and energy and blood and oxygen. Whereas if you have ketones, those ketones do cross the blood-brain barrier, and then they address those cells. And so there's a potential, neuroprotective benefit. And there's also potential benefit for post-concussion or recovery. Now, there's studies that have to happen. There is a lot of studies that have been done that show ketones and ketosis, both independently, exogenous and endogenous, both help. We have 10 grams of ketones in our drink with that intention. But the most important thing that took us the longest time to figure out and solve is how, if you have a concussion, you have 24 hours in the day. If most of the exogenous ketones that are on the market other than ours are bound to some form of, either 1,3-butanediol or salt. So your keto salts and your 1,3-butanediol based ketones, is that they both have dose limits for various reasons. And the 1,3-butanediol cannot be given to people below 21. Because it's kind of like a precursor to ethyl alcohol, which is the kind of alcohol you have in a beer. So Mike, my co-founder, and we were really concerned with how do you build a ketone that you can drink all day if you need to, without any toxic outcomes. And so that's the intellectual property that my co-founders developed for us over the last 8 years. We've spent over $10 million. We've hired people, the professor from Georgia Tech. We have, former NASA PhDs working on the business. And we found a way after 8 years and $10 million to build an exogenous ketone that's completely safe, even if you have 100 cans of Tecton a day. So that to kind of tie your question, why did we start, is to build a perfect product, one for people with brain health concerns. At the other end of the spectrum, what I also wanted to do was build a product that I'd be happy for my daughter to drink 20 of these a day. I would not let her do that with any of the other product categories I've worked with in the past.
Yes, so you had this special population, right, that you're looking to service specifically. And then, I curious, like, was there a point where you're like, okay, this has a mass consumer opportunity here? Like, because it sounds like you didn't go in with that intention, but maybe it's somewhere along the way you figured that out. Is that right?
Yes, that's right. So the origins were very, purely driven by how do we help disabled veterans. But as we learned more and more about ketones, it started to become evident that ketones are a much bigger part of human nutrition than any of us have really fully realized. And the reason for that is twofold. One, getting into ketosis is really hard. So I think at any given point in America, there may be 12 or 13,000 people that are actually following a strict keto diet. That's 13,000 people out of 350 million plus. So that's a tiny number. So how do you get to really get a lot of information and data on that? The second thing is exogenous ketones, as I said earlier, have dose limits that were in the market for the last 10 or 15 years. But now we are reading stuff that talks about how our bodies can make 180 to 300 grams of ketones a day. If you think historically, the human species on Earth, for the vast majority of our time, we have been in ketosis more often than not because we ate 1 or 2 meals a day, not 4 as we do now. We were not sedentary, and there were no processed carbs. So, it was not difficult to maintain a quote unquote keto lifestyle, right? And your body would make 180 to 300 grams. And so when you look at the macronutrient profile of our consumption, of our total nutritional palette, if you will, you have fats, proteins, carbs, and ketones. But historically, ketones were probably a bigger part of our nutritional palette than carbs were. And now it's the opposite. And that's why we have a lot of metabolic diseases where it's really comes down to someone very eloquently said, and I can't remember who, but I can't take credit for it. But really, we are keto starved now. And, to and carbs are, we are suffering from carb poisoning was his exact phrase that he used as a species. So what we've got now, to your point, is we've realized ketones are so foundational in our nutrition that we ought to be having 180 to 300 grams a day. And if you can't do that through a pure keto diet, then we will provide you with a range of innovation products. So, meal replacements, gels, gummies, shots, beverages that you can consume on different occasions, snack bars, so that you can get those 180 to 300 grams of ketones a day.
Awesome. And what are the benefits to, kind of an average American like myself, like, both short and long term of getting these ketones, the right kind of ketones, right, that you're talking about,
Yeah.
into our bodies?
Yeah. So the greatest benefits of the Tecton ketone, exogenous ketone is and there are several areas, right? As I said, they're foundationally better for your cellular energy creation than glucose. Glucose goes through 11 steps, burns 4 ATP. Ketones go through 3 steps, burn 0 ATP to create ATP, and they create more ATP per molecule than glucose under exertion. So it's that foundational that you're just getting better quality cellular energy to start with, more efficient and more effective. The other benefits are it crosses the blood-brain barrier, so you have cognitive improvement. So 3 or 4 o'clock in the afternoon, I can't have my tea or coffee anymore because I'm caffeine sensitive. I drink a Tecton, it kills two birds with one stone. One thing it does is it gives me that energy I'm looking for without the caffeine and sugar. So I sleep well at night, but I get the 2-3 hours of focus that I need. It also turns off a hormone that your stomach makes called ghrelin. Ghrelin's role in your body is just to alert you, hey, buddy, you better go eat soon because you're going to run out of nutrition. Well, in the past, that was greatly useful because it would take you, hours of hunting, foraging to find your food, whereas now you just go to the fridge. Well, ketones turn off that hormone, which is incredibly useful because that prevents me from, this is what I used to do at Coca-Cola. I used to go get a cookie and I used to go get a Diet Coke, 3-4 o'clock in the afternoon.
Sure.
And I'm obviously not the only one, right? So what that would do is ruin my sleep at night, give me, cholesterol and whatnot by eating cookies and, sugar and all of that. And now I get the energy, I get the sweet feeling in my mouth that satiates me, and I get the energy. So that's some really important benefits, especially for weight loss, that curbing of ghrelin, big deal. Then for sports and athletes, and even someone like me, I played college cricket, as I said, I was a college athlete. Now I'm 50, 53. And now for me to exercise, it means invariably I'm going to be in pain the next day. Well, with Tecton, what it does is it reduces one of the big advantages of ketones versus glucose is that ketones do not have a byproduct called lactic acid, like sugar does, like glucose does. So when you have lower lactic acid production, you have lower, soreness the next day. And that enables me to continue to keep my exercise habit up. But for elite athletes now, it gives you mental focus, gives you muscle recovery because of the, lactic acid thing, and it gives you endurance, which, if you manage your carbs and your ketones, exogenous ketones properly, you can really get a significant boost in your competitive outcomes. So that's kind of the range of, benefits because it's all foundational. Sometimes I feel like a snake oil salesman. Oh yeah, it does this and it does that and does that. But if you understand the evolutionary value of it, you think, why did nature create ketones? Well, it starts making sense. Well, you were hungry, you would have died without food, so your liver started burning your stored fats. Now what do you need? You don't need to feel hungry, so okay, let's turn off ghrelin because you need to be focused. Okay, well, focus will also be beneficial with a little bit of cognitive boost, so it improves brain function a bit, improves muscle endurance and recovery, so you can run after whatever you're chasing for as long as you need to. So it all makes sense. If you understand the evolutionary context of why exogenous ketones have been developed by the military initially and then by us.
So, I mean, it sounds to me like it's going to take a bit of education, right?
Yes.
You have to educate the market. And that's, something that's probably not new. Well, I know it's not new. Over history, there's been new products, types of products, new categories that have taken some education to the market in order to be adopted. So, when you look back over time at the different consumer products that had to educate the market first, there's any brands or companies or categories that you're looking at for inspiration and education? And then part two of that question is, how are you guys going about the education component of your marketing?
Yeah, really great question. And we are looking at, and historically, if you think about it, right, anything that was really breakthrough required a big transformation of human behavior, right? So phones, for example, just using phones was considered, well, why would I ever need to do that? And then became, why would I ever need a mobile phone? And, so over time, so that education takes time. So there's a book by a guy called Everett Rogers that he wrote in the 60s called The Dispersion of Innovation or Dispersion of Ideas. And he found the one empirically proven business model that is truly undisputable is the adoption curve. So and there are lots of guys that have written books called Crossing the Chasm and stuff like that. But it all comes down to, how do you bring a new technology to the market? And what you need to do is not get dissuaded by people in the middle of the bell curve. Or even worse, don't ever let yourself get dissuaded by people at the end of the bell curve. You got to figure out who's really, at the cutting edge of the adoption curve and get them on board first. So that's what we're doing. We go to the idea show to find people like yourself who have a voice, who have credibility, who have knowledge enough to be able to convey to your user, to your listeners, and to your followers. So we have a lot of, bringing on fitness trainers, nutritionists, athletes, people generally in the public health space, doctors, MDs. They're all part of our, ambassador network. And that's one major thing that we're trying to do. We are inspired by brands like Apple and Nike, because, take Nike, they didn't just start selling in Walmart. They started by selling to those runners in college teams. And then from there, it started to cascade, right? Apple, it used to go and Jobs and Wozniak, they went and started to sell at places like, the Home Brew Club. People who already were tinkering with keyboards and, electric, little monitors and trying to, do the first home computers of their time. And so that's the same thing that we are doing. So we're looking at people with extreme needs first, and then move into, and people who can educate, and then we'd slowly move into the mass market over time.
Yeah, it's interesting, UJ. I've seen this kind of come into play in numerous times of like I call it the other 98%. So you get 1% on either side. You get the high performers, right? And then maybe you get the populations that are sick or for some reason low functioning, right? And those are at the opposite ends. And you can start kind of at either end or both, which sounds like kind of what you're doing, right? And then eventually you get into that other 98% of the market.
Yeah, so it's kind of interesting, right? So when you think about the adoption curve, it is a bell curve, right? And
Hmm.
people, the people at the front end are called innovators, people at the back are called laggards. But the bleeding edge of the innovators are who we call evangelists. These are people trying to teach other people to educate themselves, to change their behavior, to improve their health and well-being. The laggards are people who say, yeah, diet and all of this, these are all fads. As long as, I don't overdo things, I'll be okay. And they're all overweight and uh, heading towards some form of illness. But after they get the illness, they become health conscious and they get to the top of the queue. And now they want to have, and that's true. It's true for me too.
Yeah.
Like, I had a little bit of a scare, a few years ago. I was misdiagnosed with something, but after that, I said, thank God I didn't get what I was told. A doctor diagnosed me with Crohn's disease.
Okay.
And I took the
Yeah.
same reports to another doctor, and he said, you're completely clear. All you need to do is sleep more, exercise more, and drink more water. And so from one diagnosis that led to surgery to another diagnosis just leads to a slightly improved lifestyle. That was the difference. But that occasion triggered in me a big behavior change. I started moving towards being conscious about what I put in my body, how much water I drank, and how much time I slept, all of that kind of stuff, which I didn't used to do before that. So we're looking at both those groups as early adopters for the brand. People who've had that epiphany that I need to improve, and people who are already been on the path.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing, and I like I love seeing people like you who have decades and decades of experience, right? Who are now applying it in their own unique way, like what you're doing. Like you can benefit from all that. It's like you finally have the opportunity, like, well, no, I mean, this is just me looking out from the outside at what you're doing. It's like I have a lot of intention with what we're doing. I know this is going to take a little bit of time, but if we take the right steps and we keep going this way, it's going to be successful, right? So when you look at what you're doing at Tecton, all the experience that you have, how are you intentionally building a brand that has that, like we alluded to at the beginning, that has that emotional connection, that has that trust?
Yeah, and I think the steps that we're taking in the short term is to have exceptionally high bars for ourselves when it comes to quality control of the product itself. Because I can't build trust in anyone if the product fails.
Hmm.
So the product is truly as great a product as we could humanly make. And we, people say, what is this natural flavors in your product? Now, under natural flavors, you can hide a lot of BS. In our case, it's all plant-based, vegan-friendly ingredients. So we did not take advantage of what we can do. People hide things like, they have monk fruit in their product as a sweetener, but it's got a little bit of erythritol in it. Well, erythritol, there's all kinds of headlines and CNN saying that it's, causes strokes. Well, we quickly checked in and made sure there's no erythritol in our product. And so that's I guess, the integrity that you need to have for your
Hmm.
product to be great. The second step is you really want to speak your brand's highest truth. And our brand's highest truth is humans are extraordinary. They don't have extraordinary potential. They are extraordinary. just if you think about it in the historical context of the universe, what we are is extraordinary. Now, most of us don't fully leverage all that extraordinary potential. And most of it is driven by some form of inadequacy in exercise, sleep, nutrition. And you could argue mental health, the lack of purpose. If you look, and so as a brand, what we are trying to do is build these four things and help give people the purpose and the inspiration that you are extraordinary. And you can be extraordinary in little things. You don't have to climb Everest, just be present for your kid, right? And so I find myself, and I'm a little stressed out, I've had long days, and I'm tired and I can't have coffee because, I'm, caffeine sensitive. Usually, my kid comes in and says something silly. I may not give them the time of day, whereas when I'm focused, I'm present, feeling comfortable, I'm going to be a much better father in that moment as well. So that's kind of, our purpose comes in there. That's how we're building a brand. The second step is really build a community with people who actually believe in the values that we believe in, that have the same purpose. So we're working with a lot of ambassadors that are veterans. We're working with people who care about veterans and first responders, and doctors who care, who've given their lives to help other people, who dedicated their lives, I should say, to help other people. So that's how we're building the network. So that's why we were at IDEA, because we expected to find a lot of like-minded people there. We did. The third thing that I'll say that's really important for anyone that has a technological advantage like we do is keep in mind that technology cannot be predicted to be secured forever. Sooner or later, somebody is going to find a way to do what you do or come close enough to fake it that they do what you do. And there's a bunch of people who just fake it anyway and confuse the heck out of the market. So if I just build this brand as a ketone brand, what's going to happen at some point is I'll be commoditized along with all the other ketone products. So what we are doing very assiduously is work on making sure people understand the difference between Tecton's approach and other brands' approach. And our communication, our style, how we speak, what we say, how we promote the product is all driven by a level of integrity and authenticity. So we will not say anything about what Tecton does or ketones do if there isn't a peer-reviewed independent study that says that that's what it does. And it's got to be from a really reputable source, or we will not say it. We refused to launch our product until we had the toxicity data that showed that it was benign, completely benign, even at 200 times the daily dose limits for 90 days, which is what the mice had. So that's kind of the third step, is to not just be focused on the ingredient, but make sure you don't forget that your job as a brand is to inspire people to be their healthiest. And we are just one little, a tool along the way. And then apart from that, it's really building a great company. You need people on your team that are equally passionate about your purpose. They're your evangelists, they're your salespeople. Even my R&D person, she's incredible. She's, Smita Patel. She's the one who designed Snapple iced tea way back 30 years ago.
Oh, wow.
Then worked for Coca-Cola. She's incredible, but she also knows people, and she's willing to put out her reputation, her social capital to help grow the brand. So attracting great people like her, we've got Mike Chesney, who's my co-founder, Victor Dominich, Joe Marto. I mean, these guys are all purpose-driven individuals that kind of coalesced around our brand.
Yeah, and it's really you can get great people on your team, but to get them so bought in that they're willing to leverage their social capital is different, right?
Yeah.
Like you can hire someone and pay them to do a job all day long. Right. But to get them to invest in that personally, which in something which they built over time, which is their reputation and their relationships, that's different, right?
Yes, it is. And some of it can be cultivated in people, but when you're a startup and you got to hit the ground running, you got to find people who are already there. And they already have in their, life a desire to go make a difference, do something new, do something that's value added for society in some way. Because, there's arguments that, our companies, social enterprises are to me, every company is a social enterprise because you operate in society. You have to hire people from society. You've got to feed people in society. You've got to take money from society. So you're a social brand, whether you like it or not. Now, are you a brand with the right civic, responsibility? Do you care for your people? Do you care for your customer? Do you care for your partners? Well, the more you do, the more, loyalty you'll get from all of it.
I want to get into the topic that we alluded to right in the beginning, changing human behavior at scale. I think that ties into everything that you're doing. It ties into a lot of stuff that people listen to this podcast are trying to do. And I'm sure it's more than like a 5-minute soundbite within within this podcast. But like maybe give us some insights at a high level when you look at that particular task, which is monumental. What are some of the key attributes of changing behavior at scale?
Yeah, really interesting. So, my TEDx talk was in 2014, I think. And shortly thereafter, I got in touch with a guy called Dr. James Prochaska, who wrote a book. He's well into his 70s, maybe now, but he's a professor at the University of Rhode Island. But he wrote a book called Change for Good, where what he realized as a psychologist is that there are different stages of behavior and people go through different stages of change. So from the first stage is really pre-contemplation. You don't even know you want to change. I don't know what is metabolic health. Should I even care about ketones? I love sugar, so who cares? Then you get into the contemplation mode, right? Now something has happened to trigger in you an interest to learn a little bit more about what changing your diet might do for you. Then the third step that he found is really critical that we all forget and really underemphasize, but is really important, is helping people prepare for change. If they don't go and get their shoes and their socks and the body to run with, the chances are you're going to turn off your alarm and go back to sleep. So preparation is really useful, very, very valid. And then you have the action that you actually went for a run or change your diet. But then he found there's another big problem is most people don't maintain, like gigantic percentage of people who try a diet or whatever, they just don't stick to it. So that maintenance piece. And for each stage, what I found really interesting, Eric, is that he found different tools. At the first stage, you've got to inspire people that, hey, you could be, you need to aspire to be the person you would be at the other end. Otherwise, you're not. Like, if you think I'm the Marlboro man, I love smoking, you don't want to be that wimp on the other side of behavior change who doesn't smoke. All right, well, you're not going to change behavior, right? So you got to aspire to be that. And he tries to find at an individual level what inspires you that he can then help you to change behavior. So he's done that for thousands of people. Now, that is change of behavior at an individual level. What companies like Coca-Cola and Apple have done is they've recognized that there are certain emotional traits of a brand and customer experiences that are universal. And they managed to change behavior. You can go, I did some work with the Gates Foundation. I went to Malawi, Blantyre, there's some villages in inland, and there's no place where I did not see a Coke sign, right? It's everywhere. Apple logos on people's cars and no Apple computers anywhere to be seen, right? So it's the brands have traveled way further than maybe and in Coke's case, the product has traveled too. So from our perspective, the challenge is if those guys could change behavior at scale, but they were not necessarily doing things that are good for you or healthy for you, and you take James Prochaska's changing behavior at an individual level, what we did was we married the two processes together. Is figure out what are the most common reasons why people might change behavior, and you build your brand on that, right? So for Apple, the thing was, hey, you can be creative. You are creative. All you need is a better piece of equipment that'll make it easier for you, right? And they seduce you into believing you can do amazing things, and you'll end up doing amazing things using Apple products. So that's the same thing for Tecton, is that our biggest aspiration that we notice talking to people who are already following the diet or following the keto lifestyle is that they have recognized how much more optimal they feel mentally and physically and emotionally when they have lower carbs and higher ketones in their, in their diet. And so we ought to take that idea and elevate it to the brand concept to say, hey, listen, you are extraordinary and you can be your extraordinary self if you take a few key steps. And one of them is be a little more conscious about what you eat and drink. And part of that is include Tecton in that repertoire once you get to the point you want to make that change.
Yeah. Well said, UJ.
So,
I want to make sure we cover, kind of like where you're at now. I mean, if you can, I believe Tecton's a private company, right?
yeah.
Yeah. Where is the business at now? And share whatever metrics or insights you can that you feel comfortable with. But how are you guys doing?
Yeah, so we're doing a four-pronged strategy. Well, firstly, let me give you the big picture. We are midway through a Series A raise. So we are raising 10 million and we've got about half of it in. We are looking at strategic investors to come in. One of them that just came in is one of the largest food brokers in the US. So that's one of the big, I guess, shots in the arm that we received just a couple of months back. The product is on Amazon as of last week, and we have a D2C business, which is from tectonlife.com. All our products will not be on Amazon. So some of the new stuff that we're doing, NSF for Sports certified gummies and shots and things like that will be on tectonlife.com. Then we have the ambassador program where we give 10% of any revenue an ambassador creates for us over 3 years. So one of our great ambassadors is a guy called Steve Uriah. He was there at IDEA at our booth,
Yeah.
muscular guy. Incredible fitness coach, looks at life very holistically. So anyone that he sends to our website that buys something for the next 3 years, anything that they buy, he gets 10% of that revenue. B2B relationships, a lot of high-end coaches and nutritionists have high-end clients, and some of them could be investors for Tecton. All the ambassador program takes care of all of that. And then the last piece is the retail strategy. So we are going to be testing. We're doing really well in weight loss clinics, as many as 20 cases a month in some of these locations. Because it's being bundled along with the semi-glutide injections. Now, those are expensive. They have side effects. Whereas if you take Tecton, it does almost the same benefit of curbing appetite, but gives you real energy and has no side effects. So it's working really well in that channel. So we're looking to test it in other channels like gyms, fitness studios, CrossFit studios, etc. And so looking for customers direct to, and we'll sell direct from Tecton to them. So that's that's where we are. So it's all early days. Our product just got self-affirmed GRAS in November last year, and then we raised some money, and then we started doing some activation. So we are really on the ground floor right now.
Yeah. What is the vision for this? Let's put a timestamp, like 10 years from now. Where do you see the company being?
Yeah, so I would say that, in 3 to 5 years, we will be in a truly mass market brand by then. When I say mass market brand, is you'll probably see us in Whole Foods and Target and, higher end locations like that. Gyms, healthcare practitioners. We will have a big portfolio of products so that consumers can get salad dressings to butters to there's all kinds of ways in which they can improve their keto consumption or ketone consumption. And we're going to be very cognizant about potential partners. So there could be an exit to a larger a larger consumer goods or food and beverage company potentially as a collaboration to just scale this thing wider than we could on our own. Or the other approach could be to go into an IPO, but that's something that we haven't fully fleshed out. But in the next 3 to 5 years, we feel we'll be at that level, ready for a real big expansion.
Awesome. Awesome. And last question for you, UJ, is, I asked this in the spirit of collaboration with our community here, but what do you need right now? How can we help you in your venture here?
Yeah, I think the top thing that we would love to collaborate is to build a community of practice around the keto lifestyle and help communicate the values of exogenous ketones to help people if they want to get into keto, to help to mitigate keto, the keto flu. It does mitigate that, gets you into ketosis quickly. It can help you as a insurance in case you are already in ketosis, but you're worried, what's in my soup? I might get kicked out. So you can have a Tecton. To educating people on, recovery, rehab, physiotherapists, because, it helps incredibly in reducing the kind of, the soreness and recovery and really helps with that. If you can build a community of practice around incorporating exogenous ketones into a keto lifestyle or an alternative to a keto lifestyle, because some people just can't do it. In that case, they can still benefit from, exogenous ketones. And we'd love to, build these people into our community of ambassadors and share our ambassador program with them.
Awesome. Well, it's been really interesting. This is everything I hope to get out of this interview, which was, an education on this particular segment of the market, where it's going, how you stand out, and, what the potential is. And ultimately, like, why should people care? Right. I mean, that's the big thing is, you can launch a consumer brand, but why should people care? And you outline that very well. If people want to reach out to you, or if there's a particular place that you want people to go online, where would you like people to go, UJ?
Yeah, I would tectonlife.com. So Tecton life.com, and at Tecton Life is all our social handles. Follow us on LinkedIn, Instagram, and obviously, just sign up on tectonlife.com. If you're a veteran, you get an automatic friends and family pricing of a 42% discount. This is you pay what I pay for my own product that I drink at home. And you can sign in through GovX on our website. It's also open to all medical practitioners and first responders. So anyone in that field or, formerly of that field are all eligible for that. And, we hope to have your listeners be a part of our community.
Awesome.
And we'd like to participate in yours. So let us know. We're happy to do collaborations and licensing and those kind of deals to help grow the movement.
Right on. Well, UJ, I thank you so much for joining me on a Friday morning here. I know you have a busy schedule, but it's been great to like I said, it kind of extract all that information I was hoping to find out, and go back to the first time we met at Idea. I'm like, this guy's interesting. There's something here. The product was good. It was getting me through those rough afternoons of a lot of conversations, a lot of movement, a lot of engagement, and so there's something here for sure, 100%. So appreciate it, ladies and gentlemen. UJ.
Thank you so much, Eric. I'm really grateful for the chance to be here.